Alright, we're into Objective 2 now. Objective 2 is to convert between decimals and percents. We're going to go back and forth between those two. Example 4 says to convert each number to a percent by multiplying each number by 100%. Okay, so we're going to take these decimals and convert them to percents. When we want to convert decimals to percents, here's our steps. Step 1 is to move the decimal 2 places to the right. That's the same as multiplying by 100. So when it says down here you're multiplying by 100%, moving decimal 2 places to the right is a shortcut for that. Okay? Then you're going to write as a percent. So let's look at A. 2/10. Okay? I want to move my decimal 2 places to the right. So I'm going to take this and move it once, twice. Now I'm going to write my 2 that I had, and in this space right here I have to fill that in with something, so I'm going to put a 0 there to fill it in. Okay, so instead of just 2, it's 20. Now I have to write that as a percent, so I throw a percent sign on the end of it. 20%. Okay, so 2/10. Move the decimal to the right twice, we get 20%. Let's try B. This is 125 thousandths. Again, move the decimal 2 places to the right. Okay, well now if I look, that decimal point means I moved it 2 places to the right. It's just going to go in between the 2 and the 5. So it's 12.5. And then I throw my percent sign on the end. 12.5%. Okay, and the last example. Again, this is converting between decimals and percentages. This is pretty easy. 1.5. Move the decimal 2 places to the right. Okay, so the decimal's going way out here. So I've got a 1 and then a 5. And remember, when we got that extra space, we had to fill in a 0. So it's a 1, a 5, and then a 0. And then you throw the percent sign on. 150%. Alright, let's go on to more examples. Now the next example, I want to convert from percents to decimals. So I want to go the other way. So my step is to move the decimal place 2 places to the left, or divide by 100. So when I go from percents to decimals, I'm dividing by 100, moving it 2 places to the left. Okay, so when I do this, I'm going to ignore that percent sign and put a 5 there. Now the first thing is, you might say, we don't have a, but Mr. Ayers, we don't have a decimal point. Well, any number, okay, if there's no decimal point, can be written with a decimal point right after it. So 5 is the same as 5 with a decimal point afterwards. And if you look back to your place value chart that we used at the very beginning of this lesson in part 1, then that should make sense, because that's where the decimal point goes, is right after the ones digit. Now we want to move that 2 places to the left. So I move it once, and I move it twice. So my decimal goes in front here. Okay, and again, I've got this extra loop right here, so I need to fill that in with a 0. So I've got a decimal point, and then I've got 0.5. So 5% is the same as 5 hundredths. Part B, 225%. Okay, again, 225, we put the decimal at the end, and we move it 2 places to the left. Once, twice. So when I moved it, my decimal is now going in between the 2's. 2.25. That's all there is to it. Okay, let's go on to more examples. Yay! Okay, for example 6, we're arranging numbers in order, again, from least to greatest. But the difference between this one and the last one is they're in different forms. I've got a fraction, I've got a percent, and I've got 2 decimals. Okay? So step 1 says to change all the numbers to decimals. Then we're just going to do what we did earlier when we compared decimals to each other. Okay, so step 1, change all the numbers to decimals. Well, we talked about how to change a fraction to a decimal. Okay, if I want to change 1/2 to a decimal, that is the numerator divided by the denominator. And we did that one earlier, that was 0.5. So I'm going to rewrite this 1/2 as 5/10. Okay, 12%. Remember, we had 12%. To write that as a decimal, when we go from percentages to decimals, we throw a decimal point on the end and move it 2 places to the left. so it's 12 hundredths. Okay, now notice I lined my decimals up because when we compare decimals, that's what we had to do, line up the decimal points. Next one I've got is 1 2/10, and then I've got negative 1 2/10. Okay, so I've got all my decimals lined up. Now remember, I had to fill in zeros for those. So I got 0 that has to go here. Then I need some zeros in my hundredths columns for the rest of these numbers. Well, from least to greatest, we got to put these in order now. Okay, so we have to compare these. Well, the negative 1 2/10 should go first because it's negative, and negatives are always less than positives. Now I need to compare the numbers from left to right. Well, I got zeros, or sorry, let's go ahead and cross off this number I already used here. Now I've got to compare from left to right. Well, I've got some zeros here, so zeros are less than the 1, so I need to look at these two numbers. Then 1 is less than 5, so this is my next smallest number. Okay, so I'm going to rewrite it as it looks. Okay, well, then the next smallest should be the 0.50 I had, or sorry, the next biggest, and the next biggest would be the 1.20. Okay, so I have now done step 2. I've compared the decimals. Here's my comparison of the decimals. Step 3 says to write the original numbers in order from least to greatest. Okay, the original numbers in order from least to greatest. Well, I need to remember that this was my 1/2 that I rewrote. This was my 12%. This was my 1 2/10, and this was my negative 1 2/10. So if I look, I need to rewrite them as they look to start with. Well, my smallest number, negative 1 20 hundredths, was negative 1 2/10 to start with. So negative 1 2/10. My 0 12 hundredths, that was my 12% to start with. So then I'm going to rewrite 12%. My 0 50 hundredths was 1/2 to start with. And then the last one was my 1 2/10. This, oops, sorry about that line there, just ignore it. This is my final answer. Okay, notice my numbers are rewritten in their original format they had up here. Now they're just in order from least to greatest. Alright, let's go do one more example, and then we'll be done. Okay, in example 7, I've got some real-life applications of percentages. Okay, when we handle the real-life application problems that look like this, okay, notice how they're all worded. How much money is 80% of 40? How much money is 75% of 40? Estimate 8.5% sales tax on a $19.95 purchase. That essentially means how much money is 8.25% of $19.95. So they're all kind of worded the same way. When we have these type of problems, the very first thing you want to do is multiply the percentage by the dollar amount you have. Then move the decimal places 2 places to the left, or divide by 100. Okay, so let's look at A. It says to multiply the percent by the dollar amount. Well, my percent was 80. And I had to take that times 40, because that was my dollar amount. 80 times 40, well, I got zeros. And I bring a 0 down. 0 times 4 is 0. 8 times 4 is 32. So I got 3,200. So I multiplied the percent by the number. Now I'm going to move my decimal places 2 places to the left, or I'm going to divide by 100. That's the same thing. Well, 3,200 divided by 100, if I throw a decimal point in there and move it 2 places to the left, it goes between the 2 and the 0, so it looks like this. It says how much money is 80% of 40, so we answer the question. That's $32. Okay, let's try B. Done the same way. we take the percentage, 75, times the dollar amount. Now, another way that you can do this when you got a 0 on the end for your bottom number is you can just slide the 0 over and bring it down, and then just multiply the rest of the numbers. 5 times 4 is 20, carry my 2. 7 times 4 is 28, plus 2 is 30. Okay, so I got 3,000. Now I move the decimal point 2 places to the left. So again, I put a decimal point in there, 2 places to the left, so it now goes between the zeros in the middle. The question said how much money, so I write as money, $30. Okay, and the last example says to estimate 8.25% sales tax on a $19.95 purchase. Okay, I want to estimate, so I'm going to pretend that $19.95 is $20. Okay, so I'm going to take my percent, 8.25. I'm going to multiply it by an estimation for that dollar amount. It's about $20. So again, when I have a 0 on the end of my bottom number, I can slide it over so it's easier to multiply. I just put my 0 down here. 5 times 2 is 10. Carry the 1. 2 times 2 is 4, plus 1 is 5. Then 8 times 2 is 16. Now in this problem I have 2 decimal points total, so my answer needs to have 2 decimal points. So I've got 165. Step 2 says I need to move the decimal point 2 places to the left. Well, here's my decimal point. 2 places to the left. Looks like this. Goes between the 1 and the 6. Now really, when I have zeros on the end of my number, when it's after the decimal point, I can just ignore those. So it's like 1 and 65 hundredths. It says estimate how much money that is, so it's about $1.65 that I got. Okay, now my estimating came from when I rounded 1995 to 20 to start with. So it's about $1.65 that I would have to pay in sales tax. Alright, good luck on your assignment. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. Otherwise, we'll talk to you later.